Ahoy! As announced in the past days, today I'll be doing a little Q&A and answer the questions that you guys have sent me about New World, SMITE, games in general, and other stuff. The first question is from Luca, who is wondering if I'll be doing advanced weapon guides for other weapons like I did for the Greatsword. Yes, that is something I absolutely want to do and have been wanting to do for a while, and I still want to make the advanced Greatsword PvP guide as well. However, I am waiting for the weapon changes from next patch to go through first, because otherwise I may have to redo those guides right away. Those will definitely be bigger projects and probably some collaborations as well, so they might not come out immediately, but I'll definitely start working on them once the changes are announced. Picklechip asked, if any, are there some next big games you're possibly interested in covering? Now, quite a few of you actually answered part of that question for me already by asking another question, and that is if I will be covering Throne and Liberty. In case you haven't seen it yet, I will link the video I made about Throne and Liberty right here. I will definitely be keeping a close eye on its developments, though based on the things that we've been hearing recently, I would expect that it's not coming out as soon as many people are thinking it is. I wouldn't be surprised if we're not seeing it until the end of 2023, or they possibly even delay it until next year. Whenever it is ready to play, I will definitely have a stab at it and see if I enjoy it. Brownie's Bites brought up another upcoming game that we'll probably see this year, which is Dark and Darker, a hardcore RPG-style dungeon crawler that is heavily inspired by Escape from Tarkov. I already played the last playtest of this game and I really enjoyed it, especially the first runs, which were extremely challenging because the mobs are very strong. But what I also have to say about Dark and Darker is that it felt like the novelty faded relatively quickly, and then the game became fairly grindy because a lot of time you're just spending trying to kill mobs that don't hit you anymore but are extremely tanky, and I was also often frustrated with the class balance. I think Dark and Darker has a lot of potential, but I'm not sure how much long-term replayability it has or will have by launch, so I am cautiously optimistic for this one. But those are not the only games I'm looking forward to. Wayfinder definitely has some promise as well. It is kind of an MMO and seems to take some of the mutation system aspects from New World for their PvE, though it seems to be PvE focused so far, and I kinda wished there was more of a PvP aspect to it too. And of course, I'm also absolutely looking forward to the Riot MMO. With this one, I once again think that a lot of people seem to think it's way closer than it is. I'm pretty sure this game is still multiple years out at this point, especially based on what Ghostcrawler has been saying on Twitter, so I wouldn't get too excited just yet, but when it comes, then it's probably going to be very fun. I'm also keeping an eye on Palia, which is a very casual approach to an MMO, but just seems to look nice and generally appeals to me. And then I'm of course also interested in other games that are coming in the future, like for example Riot's fighting game, somewhat, even though I'm not the biggest fan of you switching out characters mid-combat. If we ever get any more news about Fable 4, I will also be all over that. Valiant also had some other questions. They wanted to know 3 things to make heavy armor more viable in PvP. I can't think of 3 things right now, but I can think of 2. One would be adjusting stamina regeneration and also making blocking more viable for heavy, especially when not using sword and shield. As it stands, stamina in New World recovers very fast, which means that enemies can create distance very easily, but there isn't really any significant benefit for heavy armor in this quicker stamina regeneration in comparison. You get stamina just as quickly as everyone else, but what you can do with it is less effective because blocking without a shield is too weak, and your dodge is the weakest of all possible dodges. We need to exclude Ice Gauntlet here, by the way. That is also an extremely strong block, and that's the reason why it's being used in heavy as the only frequently used war build between Ice Gauntlet and Blunderbuss and sometimes Void Gauntlet. Heavy still being used in wars shows us that they still have a purpose when it comes to point capturing in places where they don't need to run after someone, but in any situation where you need to chase at all, they're just at a significant disadvantage. The second change that could be made here is something that would barely affect wars overall, where again heavy is still being used, but would have a lot more effectiveness in modes like 3v3 and OPR, and that is reducing or even removing the stagger that heavy experiences from ranged attacks. That way they still wouldn't be able to catch up to a light armor user that is just running away, but if a light armor user is trying to directly attack them while they are kiting them, then at least the heavy armor user would not be slowed down so much in getting to that enemy. This would probably need a lot of balance tweaking, but that's just a general idea that I think would increase viability. And Valiant's last question was if a face reveal or streaming was on the horizon for me. I'm currently not planning on doing a face reveal. My face is on the internet if you want to see what I look like, but with the video formats I'm doing at the moment, I feel like showing my face wouldn't really add anything to the video. But that could always change in the future. As for streaming, I could see that happening at some point, but due to me being located in Australia, the time zone isn't exactly ideal for most people to watch. Picklechip asked, what are some DukeSloth hobbies outside of video games and making content? I'll be real here, making videos is a pretty time-consuming job and it doesn't exactly leave you with much free time or much spare money. At this point, a quick shout out to my patrons who make my life just a little bit easier. So I don't really have a weekend or anything where I could spend much time on a hobby. What I mainly do outside of gaming is actually going for walks and working out. Not particularly interesting for most people, but I needed to keep me grounded and also to get some physical exercise in because sitting all day and working at your desk isn't the healthiest by itself. Marianne, I hope Google got this pronunciation right, asks, do you plan to come back to SMITE content creation for the new season? This is the beauty of YouTube's notification at work and the reason why I tell you guys to click the bell. I have actually already made multiple SMITE videos about Season 10. YouTube just decided it was not important enough to tell you. In one of those, in the patch notes for Season 10, I discussed at the end in detail what my plans with SMITE are. To put it short, I don't know. I'm playing the game casually at the moment, as much as I enjoy it, as much as it's fun for me. And I think that's what it's going to be like for the foreseeable future, so I may occasionally make videos about SMITE here and there. It's probably never going to be my exclusive and only game again though. Steven asked me about my thoughts on Predecessor. I have played Predecessor in one of the earlier test stages, and I actually enjoyed it a lot. I did think it was a good game, but I was not very happy when they announced that you would have to pay to access the game, because I think that's just not really a productive format for a MOBA. As long as they're sticking to this small audience format that they have right now, I also can't really afford to go into it as a content creator because it's just not enough audience for it. That may change in the future once they go for the full release, so I might give it another go then, we'll see. Sargizan asks, what do you think New World's big 2023 release will entail? I predict that it's going to be 3 different zones because they have said that they're working on this thing with 3 zones that are going to be focused on Angry Earth primarily. They did mention that we are likely getting some form of monkey enemy this year, so I would think that some form of jungle is involved maybe. So it could, for example, be possible that we're getting 3 different types of forests next to each other. Outside of that, I'm guessing they're going to release daggers because they know how much hype that will create. I'm guessing the healer weapon or whatever they're planning will come before that. And I'm hoping that we'll get some form of new PvP mode. An interesting option for that would require relatively little effort would be something that has been long requested, being casual practice wars. So a war mode that you can simply queue up for. Something that's a bit more of a personal wishlist thing would be an improvement to combat delay and more consistency with CC and so on. I think it's very frustrating when you are technically outskilling an opponent, but your game decides that that skill just didn't happen or land or whatever. Shaker and Dos, who also had some very kind words for me, thank you very much, were both asking what I think about the possibility of New World going free to play in the future. As of now, since New World doesn't have a subscription model, I think new people buying the game is still one of their significant income sources. At this point, they also can't retroactively paywall things or require monthly subscriptions, because that would just upset a lot of the older players that had those things for free already. So what I think might happen is that at some point New World will be almost free to play by putting it on Prime. Free games with Prime is a model that Amazon has been trying for a bit, so I could see this happening for New World, but I think this would only happen once they have a DLC or add-on that you actually have to buy, so that you would have to pay something extra if you want to get to the late game content. The same would be true for a fully free version, they gotta make a profit somewhere. But I have absolutely no insider info here, these are just my thoughts, and business models can be ran in a variety of different ways, so it's very, very hard to predict. Tony asked, what are your top 3 ideas at incentivizing open world PvP in New World? Number 1, give better rewards to open world PvP. Currently, especially if you're fighting for an extended period of time and you're fighting the same enemies multiple times, or you come to a fight late, you get almost nothing for open world PvP. I did a bit of open world PvP for fun the other day, and I did it for around an hour, and I got a single white item from it because everyone else had died too many times already, and I didn't even get one full track part on the PvP track. So rewards wise, there is no incentive to do open world PvP right now. People just fight over the forts for the extra effects or to push for a war. The second one is to make territory pushes significantly more engaging. We know the devs are working on this, and it's going to be very hard to find a good execution for this, but if they actually manage to do it, then that will definitely encourage people to do more open world PvP. The third one is probably going to be more controversial, but I think it has to be said here. Nerfs to long-range weapons. Open world PvP is significantly less fun at the moment than it was in the early days, because most people are just sitting there on their muskets and their bows at long ranges. And I don't blame anyone for that, because it is the most rewarding way to play open world PvP. It's just not fun for anyone else involved. PUBG Pride asked why I think the 20% CC duration increase from 300 con is a good perk. The example here revolves around stuns, which are easy to break and therefore kind of make the perk useless. What's worth keeping in mind is that the 300 con perk directly counteracts freedom, and that not all CC works the same way that stuns work. Slows and roots are both not something that you cleanse off by hitting the enemy. That CC duration is also affected by the 300 con perk. The other thing is that many players are running multiple pieces of freedom, which reduces the duration of your CC, also your stuns, and this perk kind of counteracts it. What can otherwise happen, for example, is if you do a shield bash and you go behind the enemy to backstab them, by the time you've actually done that, they have already gotten out of the stun because of their freedom, and with 300 con that is less likely to happen. There are also some other benefits that I will talk about in a video about freedom and CC duration increases tomorrow, so if by any chance you haven't subscribed and hit the bell yet, here's a chance to do it. The second question was if a damage reflect perk would be viable. I think it would very much be viable. The problem with these types of perks is that they can often be too strong, especially if they're attached to armor or something. I think this is something that would possibly be better suited for a heart rune, where you get a temporary significant damage reflect to punish enemies that keep bursting, rather than having it permanently. Vishad asks what I think about people boycotting or not boycotting Hogwarts Legacy because of the controversy surrounding it. Now, since this is a gaming channel, I actually want to look at this from another angle. The studio behind Hogwarts Legacy is Avalanche Software, and if you look at their history of games they have been making since the early 2000s, it's stuff like Chicken Little, Hannah Montana, Toy Story, Cars, and Disney Infinity. As such, to say my expectations for this game are low is an understatement. Also, they have posted a clip on one of their official accounts from the game to promote the game, and this is what the clip looks like. I don't know about you guys, but I personally expect a game that comes out in 2023 to not have cat fur that looks like it's glued on, and a coat sleeve that just clips through objects as if it didn't exist. I can understand those types of concessions in multiplayer games, but in a single-player RPG, there really is no excuse. Also, I don't really know who cares about Harry Potter at this point. The young generation most certainly doesn't. They make fun of millennials for caring about it, and who in their 30s goes out of their way to play a single-player game that looks like that? Just play Skyrim with some new mods or play the remake of The Witcher. There are plenty of fantasy games that can fulfill your need in that niche. My impression is that most people who say they want to play the game are mostly doing it to send a political message, and I have a feeling that many of them don't actually play games in general at all. I've got friends from all walks of life that play video games, and not a single one of them so far has said that they're actually excited for this. So I'm definitely not going to play it, and I don't even have to worry about who I would be supporting if I did. Thanks for all of your nice words and your questions, and thank you for watching. DukeSloth, out.